It wasn't until I was finally single at 62 that I began to feel whole, to feel that I was where I was supposed to be. I'm Jane Fonda, and I'm supposed to explain it all in this interview. I'll do my best. I was never confident. I'm still not particularly confident. I never thought I would be a performer. I was very shy. In fact, I didn't know what I wanted to do, which is very common today for young people. It's really hard to be young, and I found it very hard. And I floundered around for quite a long time. My dad never came home from his work. He was a movie actor, a star. He never came home carrying joy. I never got a sense that he found joy in his work, so why did I want to be an actor? So I didn't want to be an actor until I knew I was about 18, and then I had to move out of my father's house. I didn't know what to do, and I met Lee Strasberg's daughter, who said, well, you should study with Lee, you should study with my dad. And he accepted me into his class. Nobody had ever told me I was particularly good at anything, so when Lee Strasberg said, I see a lot of people come through here and you have real talent, I really felt like the top of my head came off and birds flew out and the color of the sky changed. And when I walked down onto Broadway after that class, I felt like I owned the city. It was amazing. I was transformed immediately. They always put me in roles of kind of the girl next door, you know, the ingenue. And, you know, I was fairly good and I did many of them, but I never enjoyed it. During my second movie, it was called Walk on the Wild Side, but I played a vagabond during the Depression, a tough street girl, and she became a hooker. And I really liked playing a character like that. I could sink my teeth into it. I just loved it. I just loved doing that. When I was living in France, married to a French director, I had just had a baby. I found it very uncomfortable that the French people were attacking the United States for the war in Vietnam. I didn't yet understand that, oh, they've been there already. They tried to colonize the Vietnamese and they were defeated. So they know very well that we're not going to be able to succeed. And my attitude was sour grapes, just because they didn't win their war. I hadn't looked into it enough. I didn't really understand. And then a group of American soldiers were in Paris who had been in Vietnam. They had fought in Vietnam, and they had left. It's called deserting or resisting. And I met these guys, and they started talking to me about the war. And they gave me a book to read by Jonathan Schell called The Village of Ben Suk. And I read it, and my whole life changed. It was like, phew. And I thought to myself, I have to go back home and become part of the anti-war movement. And eventually, about a year later, I did. Those years of ending the war, that was the beginning for me, and I learned a lot. I became an activist in 1970. I was 31, and when I was with people, Native Americans on indigenous lands or soldiers on military bases, you know, these are people that I would spend time with because they were dealing with problems that I was working through various movements on. And my celebrity created a distance between me and those people, frontline people, real people on the ground. And so I felt, well, if I'm going to do this, meaning be an organizer, I probably shouldn't be a movie star anymore. And I had a friend, a black lawyer in Michigan named Ken Cockrell, and I said to him, he was like my mentor for a while, and I said, Ken, I think I'm going to quit the business. I don't want to be in Hollywood anymore. I want to be an organizer. And he sat me down and he said, Fonda, the movement has countless organizers. We don't have movie stars. You not only have to keep on acting, but you have to take more control of your career, have agency on the work that you do. And I was stunned, and I began to think about that. And out of that came Coming Home and 9 to 5 and China Syndrome and movies that reflected issues that were interesting to me. My identity was never, ever being a star, being a celebrity, movies. It's what I did. I had to support myself. People need to be useful. They might not even be conscious of it, but people need to have meaning in their lives. A sense that they know why they're here. And in the absence of that, I think there's a lot of, I feel, anxiety, malaise, and, I think as a young person, you can get in a lot of trouble if you feel that way. When I was young, I would say like up to 25 or something like that, I just assumed, because I was floating in space, and I thought that I would probably die. I'm sure I'm going to become an alcoholic or a drug addict, and I'm going to die alone. When I became an activist, the depression lifted. I began to feel, I know why I'm here. I'm here to use my platform as a celebrity to make things better. It just took a long time. It wasn't, and then I was always married. 3 times. My dad was married 5 times. So, I very much didn't want to catch up to him. So I stopped at 3, realizing that I just wasn't dealt a hand that made me good at relationships. Even after I became an activist, I always turned to men to help me find the next step. I'd be going in a particular direction, and I would meet a man who could take me further down that road. And then I would move on. Isn't that a terrible thing to say? It wasn't until I was finally single at 62 that I began to feel whole, to feel that I was where I was supposed to be. When it comes to relationships with men, the problem is falling in love. What's wrong with that sentence? Not love, falling. And what happens to a lot of women is 2 people come together and the woman falls, or at least a lot of women. Me, I'll just talk about myself. I would tend to mold myself according to what my then husband wanted me to be. But there was always a center to myself that they never touched. My friend Eve Ensler, the author of Vagina Monologues, she said the 3 things that you have to look for when you go into a relationship. You want to feel safe, you want to feel seen, and you want to feel cherished. What I realize now is 2 people that love each other, whether it's 2 women, 2 men, or a man and woman, or whatever, coming together, and they stay on their own 2 feet. 2 whole people coming together and maintaining their agency, their strength, while at the same time caring for the other, nurturing the other, cherishing the other, but never losing themselves. I think that in there lies the secret to a successful relationship. What I found very often is if the woman shows up fully and she's present and she says to her partner, come on, meet me here where I am, the man will flee. At least those are the men that I chose. What I've realized in my dotage, my old age, is probably that men showed up for me and said, come on, Jane, I'm here. Show up. And I fled. I wonder how many men who were really perfect for me, I fled because they would have made me show up. And instead, I chose men who wouldn't know what that even meant, so they never asked me to. I mean, I can give all kinds of parenting advice. None of it is what I practiced. I have studied parenting to find out, can it be taught? Can it be learned? Because I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't know how to be one. I married men who were good fathers, okay? I was lucky. 2 of my 3 husbands I had children with. A parent is supposed to show up with open eyes, eyes of love, and reflect the child back to themselves with eyes of love, and know how to listen. If because of depression or addiction or whatever, you have duct tape over your eyes, it's not going to work very well. I didn't know how to show up. I was a food addict. I was an addict, and it screws around with you. And I apologize to them, but you know, it's hard to make up for what you didn't do. However, you know, I do believe that it's never too late. So, you know, I try as best I can to do a better job now, and I love having grandkids. They're like second chances. You can also give them back at the end of the day. My women friends are a big priority for me. I just have never been able to have the kind of relationships with men that I have with my women friends. Most of my women friends are younger than me and braver than me, and they challenge me and make me better and put starch in my spine. And do you know that there was a study done at Harvard Medical School that showed that not having women friends is more dangerous to your health, or as dangerous to your health as smoking? It's our superpower. And men don't have that superpower. Very few men do. I don't know, I think it's evolutionary. They went out hunting with their spears to get meat, and we would stay back having our children, circling with grandmothers and young mothers and children, everybody helping each other. We knew, even back in the hunter-gatherer stage of our development, about interdependence. Interdependence with the natural world and with each other. We would never have survived without grandmothers and without each other helping. You know, it's women who are in book clubs and quilting bees and garden clubs. It's mostly women. We congregate. We understand the notion of the collective, of the common good. This is very important now because the crisis that we're facing, especially the climate crisis, it's a collective crisis that requires collective action. And I think it's why more women are involved in the climate movement, because we're less vulnerable to the disease of individualism. You know, we tend to come together, understand the strength is in numbers. We can't do anything alone. We have to be part of movements, part of organizations. I've been a climate activist for decades, but I'd been doing individual things. I mean, I'd marched and protests and things like that, but it was because of Greta Thunberg and the young climate activists who forced me to see that. And Naomi Klein, it was a book that she wrote called On Fire, A Burning Case for the Green New Deal. And I mean, I read that book and I went to a phone and I called the head of Greenpeace and said, I'm moving to DC. And we started Fire Drill Fridays. And we went virtual in January, and we've had 8,068,000 people following us across all platforms. But people came from all over the country, mostly women, 2/3 were women, and engaged in civil disobedience and risked arrest. My life got better mid-70s. I mean, youth is hard. Youth is hard. What am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to know? I'm supposed to commit myself to something, but I don't know what. You know, it's all unanswered questions. The longer you live, the more, it's like, I've been there, done that. Well, I've hit bottom and I've survived. So, you know, you separate the wheat from the chaff. You learn not to make mountains out of molehills. It's called wisdom. You tend to get wiser. I mean, in a way, you have to work at it. You have to very intentionally learn from the events in your life, especially from your mistakes. That's what you learn from. But I do a lot of reading, and I learn a tremendous amount from what I read. I'm a student, which is why I feel always that I'm the youngest person in the room, even though I'm usually the oldest. And I hope I die feeling that way. I can tell you this, in my 20s, I was ancient. I was so old in my 20s. And now, even though my body hurts like hell, I feel very youthful. It's because I know why I'm here. But here's another thing. This is a bit of wisdom. I was married to Ted Turner when I turned 59. I was out with about a dozen cowboys rounding up bison on one of his ranches in New Mexico. And on the way back to headquarters in the back of the truck with the cowboys, I thought, oh, next year I'm going to be 60. 60, that's the beginning of the end. There's the first 30 years and the second set of 30 years and then 60, and then there's the last 30 years. I did not know how I wanted to live out the last act of my life. I realized in order to figure that out, where I was supposed to go, I had to know where I'd been. And so for 1 year, I very intentionally researched myself as though I was somebody else, as though I had to write about this person, Jane Fonda. By the time I turned 60, here were the things that I realized. First of all, what I had not known, that I'm brave. I didn't know that. I realized that I'm not afraid of dying, but I'm afraid of having regrets. I'm afraid of getting to the end of my life with regrets when it's too late to do anything about it. So I thought, well, what you have to do then, you have to live the last part of your life in such a way that when you get to the end, you won't have any regrets anymore. See, the more you can be intentional about how you're living, the better. You can't make your life longer, but you can make it deeper. And the way you make it deeper is by being intentional. And so that was the guide for the last 30 years, although now I think it's more like 40 years, now that I'm already in my almost to my end of my third act. I kind of know how to live now.